second.
Yes.
I can be like
Tuck
this.
myself in.
That's better.
There you go. Cover me up. All right, so Sean,
Yeah. Are you feeling silly?
I am feeling curious.
I'm feeling curious. As
Yeah,
well.
I'm feeling curious. I'm happy to be in London. I'm always happy to be in London
Right.
for many reasons, which we discussed in a short podcast that we just
We did do that.
sitting on the grass in Hyde Park.
Right.
That was cool.
The grass was dry. That was nice.
Yeah, it wasn't,
You did.
wasn't
You sat
raining.
on your.
So, as I said in the other podcast with Rob Black, I'm really disappointed by the weather in London. It's not raining.
I know. We're actually having
What's wrong with you
quite a
guys?
nice summer. We had some yesterday. We got a rain in for this week yesterday.
We got a little bit. But look what we got.
I know, Jeff. It's good to see you.
Yeah,
Jeff
it's
White,
good to be
the one
here.
and only
Yeah.
author, podcaster, documentarian, many things.
Many
Journalist.
Yes.
Jack of all trades.
Yeah, the last time we talked to each other was 2 years ago,
right.
1 year and a half ago,
Yeah,
RSA
RSA.
conference,
Yeah.
and we had a really good chat about your book at the time, but also the Lazarus Effect, the one before, and honestly, we have no agenda here. So how about a few words about who you are, just for the few people that don't know who
Sure.
you are, and then what you're up to these days.
So I'm Jeff White. I'm an author and investigative journalist, and what I cover generally is organised crime and technology. So wherever organised crime and tech cross over, tends to be where I hang out. So obviously done a lot of stuff on cybersecurity, computer hacking, and so on. But also when we spoke at RSA, I just put out my last book, Rinsed, which was about money laundering and how money is laundered, and particularly how technology is changing that money laundering. So in that book, obviously, I look at computer hacks, how hackers launder money, because they have to launder money as well. But I also looked at how drug dealers and fraud rings and child sexual abuse networks and prostitution rings also launder their own money. So it's kind of looking at how tech's changing that sort of criminal world. So the North Koreans that I cover a lot have not stood still, have done other stuff. In fact, since we spoke at the RSA conference, at that time, their sort of greatest hack that was attributed to North Korea was a raid on a video game called Axie Infinity, where they managed to steal $625 million. Huge quantity of money. They took that money, by the way, in 1 minute 55 seconds. That's how long it took them to transfer the money out. You compare that with the old diamond heists and bank robberies where you have to load the van with all the banknotes. 2 minutes to steal $500 million. And I thought this was an amazing story, and I thought, well, this is the showstopper, Since we spoke at RSA, they've gone on to do another hack where they stole $1.5 billion. I think that took about 8 minutes to transfer the money out.
Wow.
So again, you can see this. I try and explain to people, if your company had revenue growth of over that level, if you went from 625 million to 1.5 billion in 2 years, you'd be cheering from the rafters. It'd be fantastic. So the North Koreans do seem to be absolutely pumping at the moment. It's really fascinating.
You know what's fascinating is I always think in metaphor, or I make weird connection with movies in my head, and I am envisioning the bank robberies, right? And you mentioned it. How many things could go wrong? Maybe you got a flat tire. Maybe there is an accident. Whatever can happen, right? And it take time. Maybe there is a car chase, and here you're talking about 1 minute and a few seconds to just siphon out everything.
Yeah. The disadvantage to the modern way of doing it is that in the old days, if you stole banknotes or gold bullion, well, that's generally sort of anonymous. Yes, you can trace the bank numbers, the serial numbers on the banknotes, but the gold, you can melt the gold down and sell it. The banknotes, you can run them through tills and so on. Right. So yes, getting hold of the actual physical money in those cases is really difficult. But once you've got that, laundering it, spending it, not quite so difficult. These days, if you steal cryptocurrency, which the Bybit hack, Axie Infinity, a lot of these hacks, it's all crypto. The problem, as you'll know, is you can trace cryptocurrency.
Right,
it's transaction traceable. So that's why the money laundering piece is so important. Right. Why I really want to focus on that is because, the crime might be easier in some ways, but the laundering bit is really hard. So that's why I want to look at that technology laundering bit as a subject.
So how do you go about that? As much as you can
Know,
share.
do you have an idea?
No.
As in, how do you launder money, or how do you?
No. How do you go about your research?
Yeah.
Because you're looking and connected to things that
Yeah.
people don't want you to be looking at and connected to.
This is true. Look, I'll be completely honest about this. There are investigative journalists who do way better work than I do as an investigator. You know, people like Brian Krebs, Andy Greenberg at Wired. You know, these people do really, really, really fantastic stuff. Joseph Cox as well. You know, I think it's 404 Media. His company he works for now. Really, really great. A lot of the stuff I cover, frankly, it's in legal documents. These people have been caught, convicted, and so on. The problem is, the hack happens, and there's a big headline. Oh my gosh, there's been a hack. And then maybe a year, 2 years, sometimes several years later, they finally catch the person, they indict them, they convict them, and it all comes out in legal documents, which of course are written by lawyers. So they are the most boring documents ever. So my job basically is to not necessarily cover the hack as it happens on the exploding news spectrum, but try and keep an eye on it and go, okay, have we got the full story here? Can I tell the whole story from what happened all the way through to the end? And can I go through these legal documents and actually turn the legal language into a compelling story? Legal documents, you have to read them 3 times, right? First time, just to make sense of what the hell's going on. Second time, you start going, oh, right, so that person did that and that person did that. Right. And then the third time, you go through and you're like, right, here's the story I'm going to put together as a story. So turning a legal document into a story, the story's there, all the facts are there, the details there. You just have to dig. Because, of course, the lawyers aren't writing books and doing politics.
And connect the dots time-wise and relationships.
Precisely so.
Yeah.
And you're looking for those stories that you can tell over a long period of time and you can really unwrap it for people. Again, I just worry with a lot of cybercrime that the public see, oh my God, there's been a hack, and then the news vanishes and we move on. Right. And it doesn't really do the public a great service, that. I think we need to do a better job at explaining this stuff. And that's what things like books and podcasts can do. They can really take a long perspective on this. I mean, in the UK, we've had these ransomware attacks recently.
Right.
Marks and Spencer's, Co-op. People I'm talking to, you know, my mum and her friends and so on, they're saying, well, how does this work? Who's behind? They've got all these questions. Because, of course, they've heard the headline on the news about, you know, shops being attacked. But nobody sort of sat them down and explained to them in a way they can absorb and actually enjoy as to how this thing works, how it all happens.
Yeah. It's interesting because we had yesterday William
Line, yeah.
William Line from the National Security Agency.
Oh yes, yeah.
He's in charge of the cybersecurity, and
yes.
we talked about ransomware.
Yeah,
Go figure.
Yeah. Well, actually, so Will Line at the National Crime Agency, I think his role's slightly changed now. But the last time I spoke to him, there was an amazing operation that the National Crime Agency did, which was looking at ransomware and again how the money was laundered. It was an astonishing investigation. Because they started tracking where does this cryptocurrency go once you've ransomwared somebody and they've paid the ransom. And they managed to work out that it was going into all of these sort of Russian companies, these Russian businesses. They started mapping out these Russian businesses, run by a sort of Russian couple, quite a glamorous Russian couple. But so that's how, you know, if you're a ransomware guy and you've got a ransom, it's in Bitcoin, you just hand over your Bitcoin to these guys, these Russian business people, and they will just give you Russian rubles in return. Well done. As a ransomware person, you buy your Lamborghini or whatever.
Yep.
But that just transfers the problem down the line. Those Russian business people, Katerina Zdanova is one of the women who's incriminated in this. Katerina Zdanova and her companies have got a problem. They're sitting on hot Bitcoin. So what do they do with the Bitcoin? You've got this Bitcoin, where are you going to sell it? They hit on drug gangs in the UK and other places. You're selling drugs, you sell them for cash, you've got cash, you want to send the cash over to South America to buy some more cocaine. What are you going to ship it by FedEx? It's not going to work. So the drug gangs would use their cash to buy the crypto from Zdanova's network, and then the drug gangs have crypto and they can send it over to South America to import more drugs. Zdanova's network has then got cash, so they can move the cash across borders and wash it and so on. So you've got this amazing picture where people have this idea of, oh, well, drug dealers and cyber criminals, you know, they're not in the same world. No, they absolutely are, and they're connected by this money laundering network. Amazing investigation, really amazing investigation.
Here's my question about it. It's almost like you move it from one hand to another, then you don't have it anymore. You're kind of like, you're clean, but you didn't melt the gold.
No.
The trace is still somewhere, right?
Yeah.
Somewhere is still holding the hot.
Yes. So there's two answers to that. There's two answers to that. If you want the modern equivalent of melting gold, it would be a cryptocurrency mixer, which basically you put your cryptocurrency in, and everybody puts their crypto in, and it mixes it all together and then spits it out to a fresh wallet address. So the cops can see the money going in but then it's a black box and they can't connect it to the money going out.
She's a blender.
Effectively a blender. In fact, one of them was called Blender. That was its name.
So I thought I was onto something.
That's your gold melter. The other option, that's one way of going. The problem is the US government's been going after these mixers and shutting them down and so on. The other option is you take the money to legitimate exchanges. You try and get it through banks, you try and get it through shops, you try and get it through cryptocurrency exchanges like Kraken and Binance. And sure, if you've got, let's say, $1 billion, you're going to take it to some of these places and you're going to get caught or stopped or spotted, you're going to lose the money. But if you've stolen $1 billion and let's face it, you get out with 500 million, that's still a hell of a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
So the question is, how long can the prosecutors, the investigators, keep chasing your money into these different routes? If you're laundering it through 1,000 different wallets, can the prosecutors keep up with all of that? Can they go to all those wallet providers and get the money back? So if you can't use your gold melter, you can take tiny, tiny fragments of gold and wash them everywhere, and the investigators just will never be able to track all of those tiny particles of gold.
Wow.
Do you have a sense of the money the crypto that's seized, right? Because boats, yachts get seized, cars get seized, homes get seized, they get auctioned. The money presumably goes somewhere after that. What about the crypto?
So there are three, people talk about crypto's traceable, and some people say, well, crypto's traceable, so it's terrible for criminals. Why would you use a form of money that's so traceable? Tracing is step one if you're the victim. Tracing where my money went, that's step one. But that doesn't help me get it back. You know, steps 2 and 3 are freezing it and recovering it. So you're right, there are efforts to freeze and efforts to recover. Legitimate big crypto exchanges, if they get a warrant from a police force or a judge, or if they get approached by a legit crypto tracing company, some of these crypto exchanges will freeze the money and say, yep, okay, fair dues, this is criminal money, we're going to freeze it. But we're not going to send it straight back to you. You've got to come to us with the evidence that it's stolen and the evidence that you are the person we need to refund it to. Because of course the worst thing is if they refund the money to somebody and then the real victim comes and says, oh, that was my money. It's, oh, sorry, we sent this bloke over here. Whoops. So you've got to repatriate the money to the right people. In terms of how much of it gets repatriated, I mean the hack I talked about, the North Korean hack, the 1.5 billion. This was the victim was Bybit. It's a cryptocurrency exchange. Of that, I think the last I heard was something like 300 million had been recovered. So because there was a whole vigilante exercise of have a go crypto tracers who went, oh, I found some here and I found some there, and they managed to get it back. But that still leaves potentially 1.2 billion out there in the wild.
A lot,
and increasingly that money is now just dark. It's gone dark. You can't find it.
Well, this is really fascinating to get into it, and I know people love listening to podcasts on crime, and my wife is one of those that watches this mystery murder thing, and she's like, "You want to watch it with me?" I'm like, "No, I'll go play guitar. That's okay." But a lot of people love it, and I know you do podcasts, of course, and you mentioned a documentary on ransomware. Now, is the purpose of that to try to educate people into what ransomware is? Yeah,
exactly. I mean, there was a BBC documentary. It was called From Russia to Redcar. Russia, you obviously know. Redcar, you might not. It's an area of the northeast of England. Redcar Council, Redcar and Cleveland Council, to give it its proper name, was attacked by ransomware gangs in, I think, 2021. And it caused havoc, like absolute havoc. They went back to paper and pen, like nothing worked, none of the computers worked. The reason hitting councils is a real problem is because, you know, your local council, they do the dustbins and the libraries, but they also do child protection. So if a child is in danger and they're put into a safe house or a foster family, that's handled. All that stuff went down. All of it went down. So, you know, really critical emergency services went down. So we did this whole documentary about how the Redcar and Cleveland Council attack happened. As part of this, we wanted to speak to some of these ransomware gangs. Now, ransomware is fascinating for many reasons. One of the reasons it's fascinating is because the criminals involved in ransomware actually want to talk to the press, unlike a lot of criminals. They want to do that to put pressure on the victim. Because if the media covers the hack, then they can turn around to the victim and say, look, it's hit the news, you need to pay up. So for journalists, it does put you in a very difficult position because you're part of the game that they're playing. But nonetheless, I managed to get talking to some of these ransomware gangs. And then the documentary makers said, well, we want a video. We want to interview them on video. So that's never going to happen. They just don't do that. But sure enough, one of the gangs, a gang called Chillin, who hit an NHS provider last year, agreed to do a video interview.
Wow.
So they were going to do it anonymously in a mask and a hoodie, which immediately journalistically causes problems. Anonymous interviews are not something that journalists like to do. I mean, if somebody's on camera, I want them to show themselves. I'm showing myself. But the only way was if they did it anonymously. Yeah. Okay, so we cleared that with the BBC. The guy comes on, he's got the mask and the hoodie and gloves. He's wearing gloves as well, smart.
Like in those marketing thing for cybersecurity.
That's right. Reinforce it.
Something actually, when the interview went out, somebody on LinkedIn sort of said, "Oh, you journalists, you always use these cliched hacker and hoodie images," and I said, he chose that. That's what he wanted to do. I didn't tell him to.
I didn't trust him.
We tried to do the interview. We tried to do the interview over, I think it was Tox. They were using dark web software. But the connection, because the Tor connection, we just couldn't get a live link to establish. And he was very frustrated by that. So I said, fine, I will send you the questions, you record your answers. Which again, is not ideal, because I can't challenge them on the answer. It was the only way of doing it. They send through the video, and it took a couple of days, and I was thinking, why is it taking them so long to record the answers? When the video arrived, it had the sort of Chillin logo burned into the edge. It's very professional, very high quality video. And the guy comes on, sits down and says, it's a video for Jeff White at the BBC. And then he animates the questions on, like an animation thing of my question, and he answers it. And then the next one animates, really slick. And then at the end of the video, this is the bit that the BBC didn't broadcast, he goes like that, and like that. And I was like, what I found that really intriguing, of like, what a strange thing to do at the end of the interview. But then I realised that if you think about that, if you think about being an extortionist, right, on the one hand, you've got to hate your victim enough that you want to blackmail them, right? That's what ransomware is, blackmail is.
Yeah,
and to blackmail somebody,
that's
you've got to like not care about them. But you have to negotiate with them and get the ransom out of them. So you have to both love them and hate them. So loving and hating. Maybe that's what he was getting at subconsciously. I don't know. Very bizarre.
Ask him.
Very bizarre. I should go back and get in touch. Yeah.
That'd be interesting.
Wow.
So that went out, and the idea was to sort of unpack one of these ransomware attacks, show people the effect it has. And so that's on iPlayer, and people can still watch it and so on. So,
very cool.
And there's talk of turning that into some kind of podcast for the BBC.
So now people watch this.
Yeah.
Very cool.
The thing about the TV documentaries, you've got half an hour. Inevitably, you just can't explain stuff really properly. You can't go into all of the little nooks and crannies of it. The whole issue about how we as journalists deal with this, that just doesn't really become part of a half-hour programme on TV.
Right.
Quite shallow. But a podcast, you've got a few hours, you can explain this stuff, you really get into it. So if we do manage to turn that into a podcast series, so much more room to explain so much more stuff.
I love that, because in a way you want to bring it to be something that is not somewhere that you have no idea what it is. You interested people enough, and then the one that really want to know more, they can follow the podcast.
So getting those stories to drive it forward.
Yeah, that's really cool.
And I think one of the, just like you wanted to be able to challenge the response to your question, I think a lot of people try to figure out, that story, I think I understand it. What's the connection to me?
Yeah.
Right.
And I don't know if you're working on anything there where people can engage, or the BBC is, people can engage to say, I've seen this, is this similar, or how does that, family members or whatever, how does this story impact me, and having some dialogue, I think.
Exactly so, and I think that was what was interesting about those high street attacks in the UK we've seen recently, Marks and Spencer's and Co-op, was you could literally go into the shop and see the effect. My mum went into M&S and said, they sold out of almost everything. No, they haven't sold out, they just can't get it because there's a supply chain attack there, so a supply chain issue there. I think the effect on people is really important. In the documentary, we spoke to a couple who live in this area in Redcar and Cleveland. The wife has quite a serious health condition and needs constant care from her husband. The council are absolutely key to them. The council carers, the council services, they're totally reliant for a lot of that. The council went under. They weren't answering the phones, they couldn't get through to them. Vital support they needed went away. That couple said that they almost broke, the strain it put on them almost broke them up. It almost destroyed their relationship. So that's the thing, these cyber attacks happen. It's not just about money and code and data. Real people really suffered. I mean, you know, a loving relationship that's so important to them almost went under because the council was hosed by this cyber attack.
Yep.
And I remember back to Target, this is a number of years back now, where the credit card system was compromised, and a lot of people in the U.S. shop at Target. They have paychecks week to week.
Yeah.
They buy on credit card. They pay it the next week. If the card's maxed, they can't get the food for the kids. They can't get the clothes for whatever, and it impacted a lot of people in need already.
Yeah.
That then had very little resource to
It's interesting.
manage.
There's been a couple of they're not hacks, but there's been a couple of bank outages in the UK over the years. I've been a journalist. I think from talking to people who work inside bank IT, not the security side, but the IT departments in banks, it is slightly terrifying that these banks are processing just so many transactions, and the software it's all built on is aging software, and it does occasionally fall over, and it's kind of held together with string and rubber bands. This stuff. You know? So these banks, you know, they have a weekend where the cash points will go under and can't process transactions. You know, I think, oh, that's bad news, but I suppose I'll have it up and running by Monday or Tuesday. What's been fascinating watching those bank outages is how close to the line a lot of people are. You know, it's like, well, I don't have any petrol in my car, I can't drive to work, I don't have any food in the fridge. You tend to think, well, I can get over for a few days, it'll be fine. A lot of people in the country are, their life is set up sort of day to day, and if the bank goes out for 3-4 days, literally can't get to work, lose their job, can't feed the kids. It's really serious. You know?
And I think
can't tap the bus pass, whatever it is.
And to wrap this, I think it's important that we bring this cybersecurity. It's coming over and over in any societal cybersecurity technology conversation on how we always see in the news the big hack. We can see the big stuff, the big company, but there is people getting hit by cyber criminal every day, and it hurts, and you don't hear those in the news. So I think it's important what you're doing, and that the BBC is actually bringing this to the people. So it's really cool.
I mean, I've spoken to various companies, and again, these are hacks that have never hit the news, but you know, the company's spoken to me, or the organisation's spoken to me. Schools, small businesses, corner shops, you know, little factory operations somewhere. It hasn't taken them out of business, but for days and sometimes weeks, they're just not able to do what they normally do. They can't make the money they normally do. So, yes, in some cases you have these huge hacks that take a company out of action or take a huge amount of money. But overall, we've got this situation where we're gradually being drained. You know, it's that effect of just pulling everybody down a bit because you've taken the weeks off to deal with a cyber attack. So your profit that year is going to be a bit rubbish, and you're not going to hire people or expand. It's that drain on the economy, that general drain on the economy, that I think doesn't get measured. It's hard to measure.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Well, Jeff, we really appreciate your time.
Yes.
It was really good to see you.
And
and keep up with that work. I definitely let me know about the podcast when it's going to start again.
Absolutely.
I hope soon, and hope to have you on again.
Fantastic.
Really
Thanks
enjoy it.
Enjoy the rest of your time in London.
Yeah.
Sunny London.
Sunny London.
Sunny London.
Exactly.
Go figure. I'll have a T-shirt made just for that. Sunny London.
Brilliant.
Well, and everybody else, I hope you enjoy the conversation. We're still here in London, and Infosecurity
I was sitting here enjoying
Europe. And we're going to have many more conversations, so stay tuned. And Shani's going to tell you where you can.
I like to do this part. itsbmagazine.com/infosec25. This conversation and all the others we have from this week. So thanks for joining.
Stay with us. Jeff, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.